The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
All right, so let's talk about low bid. What we're going to do as a part of this is a few things. First, I'll give a little bit of an overview and get excited because I have an announcement, and because I labeled it as exciting announcement, you're going to be excited for it. And then we're going to go through 13, and this is not a lucky 13. These are the unlucky 13 downsides of low bid. And we're trying to focus on some things that are often overlooked that people don't take into account when they're considering low bid as a procurement method. From there, we will also chat about some of the faulty assumptions folks have about low bid. That maybe is why we do it so often. And we'll summarize things and get excited for another exciting announcements, plural, actually. We've got 2 exciting announcements at the end. So 3 total throughout our session today. Let's start with overview. So overview, making sure that all of us are on the same page first is, number 1, what is low bid? The boring definition is the owner or the client is going to select the lowest responsive and responsible bidder who proposed. It can go by a bunch of different names, right? So RFQ, ITB. I've never really seen someone use an RFB, but that's a thing that could happen. Hard dollar, hard bid, cost only, price base, open tendering. That's for the Canadians. Competitive bidding, sealed bidding, fixed price bidding, auction based. And I love this one. Also, Canadians did a great job on it. Economically advantageous tendering or bidding. So economically advantageous, that's what low bid is apparently. To illustrate this, right, low bid, let's say we had these 5 bidders in response to our solicitation. We've got the prices as shown, right? The winner is going to be very easy to spot, the 59,000 compared to all the other 99s that are in there. And of course, I'm sure this wouldn't concern you at all if you had 5 bidders and one of them was way out of line with the others. I'm sure that they were just perfect. They made no mistakes. I mean, look at that. They are the most economically advantageous option. So perfect. Life is grand. There's no issues with that. Well, let's do a real example together. Now, I will say that we have changed names here. We don't want to embarrass anyone, but these are real examples, of projects that our team has helped with or observed. So let's dive in. So this was a particular university, and they had a construction project for a prominent building on their campus. And they did get 8 proposals in response. The average schedule that was proposed to perform this construction work was 115 days. Their average bid cost was $540,000 at the time. This is a long, long time ago. So basically $540 gajillion dollars in today's inflation terms, to be precise. And I'm going to narrow it down to their top 4 who made their shortlist. They'd actually use an RFP here, but it'll illustrate the low bid tendencies that we sometimes have in the professional world. So here's a top 4 shortlisted. We had total costs here. You've got the 4 costs range from $425 up to $663. We have their proposed schedule duration as measured in the total days of schedule to perform the construction work. And then we had a simple, I way oversimplified this, but 1 to 10 evaluation score. So like this is contractor A or bidder A. They received a 3 out of 10 average evaluation from the evaluation committee on their approach to the project. Whereas let's say look at contractor C, got an 8.5 out of 10, much, much better. We had references in there. We had interviews with their project team, specifically their project manager and site superintendents. You can see all the interview scores here. And then these were weighted differently. It's besides the points. If you kind of factor in all the weights and all the calculations, you can see what the grand total points ended up being as a part of the selection. So the answer is obvious, right? We've got a good best value type of choice here, 92 points out of 100. looks to be the second lowest cost, at least of the top four shortlisted contractors that were remaining out of the 8 who originally proposed. Got pretty good scores throughout. Their schedule's a little faster than average, but it seems within range. Let's proceed. But being the particular university that this happens to be, they're very smart there, if you weren't aware, at this university. And they had this really genius idea. Does anyone have a guess as to what their idea was? Any temptations you think they may have been dabbling with in their genius brains? What do you think? That's a real question. What do you think they were tempted by? Come on now. Da 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 dun dun dun. Well, as long as contractor A doesn't have $100,000 worth of change orders, we still come out ahead as a client. That was one thought. And that's true. That is actual math that they were able to do. For $125,000 plus 100K, you're still below 527. And as long as their schedule doesn't, roughly double, we will finish on time or early compared to, the average. So why not proceed with the lowest bidder? Now, could you do that as a public sector entity? No. This anonymous, unnamed university happens to be private, so they can do whatever they want. And so they were tempted, even though according to their own criteria in their solicitation, here's the score, the choice is obvious. They thought to themselves, hey, we'll manage this as long as it's not $100,000 in change orders, we're going to be fine. So that's what they did. Now, we told them, don't do it. Bad idea. Very bad idea. And they said, don't worry about it. We're smart. We know what we're doing. We said, okay, just let us measure how the project goes. About a month into the project, they told us, hey, please stop measuring. So you can see where this is headed. That was a legitimate conversation. By the end of the project, it turns out that Harvard University was correct. They were able to get this job done with only $99,000 worth of change orders. And I believe that it finished within 99 days of schedule as well. That's why I can remember it 20 years later. So they were right. It was cheaper than going with B, and it finished slightly faster than going with B. But I will hit you with the quote from their project manager, reflecting on the project when we debrief them at the end, since we were no longer allowed to measure. Never let me do that again. I will die 5 years earlier due to all the stress that I accumulated from this project. I almost had a heart attack multiple times, and I think it gave me gray hair and cut my life expectancy shorter. Now, given that, I mean, we've all had to manage at times, or I've heard horror stories of managing a challenging vendor or contractor. Do you think it really only cost them $99,000 of change orders? Like, no, that's just what was in the contract. There's all this peripheral damage. And that damage is also measured in terms of cost to your soul, to your life expectancy, apparently, as well. All right. So we have many, many more stories like this, which brings me to our exciting announcement, which is that as a part of RFP Doctor, we are going to launch a new series called Low Bid Disasters. And we'll just cover a few of these different examples in future RFP Doctor sessions. We'll take a few minutes of time and just share another funny story with you. Procurement horror stories gone wrong. And usually procurement horror stories where things have gone wrong, it's due to being tempted by a low promise or some unrealistic promise up front. And then you get to track how it all turns out. So we'll share some of those with you so you don't repeat some of the mistakes that your peers have made in the past. So that was my exciting announcement. But as fun as some of the stories can be, at least to me, today we're going to do something different. Today we are going to throw the book at low bid. You see how nervous and sad looking low bid is there? We're coming for it. We're throwing the book at it. In case you didn't realize, CPE is pretty anti-low bid. So let's dig into the unlucky 13 downsides of low bid. And I said we're throwing the book at it here. I have nothing pretty for you. I just have cold, hard facts. I have text on a screen to make your eyes bleed with the challenges that low bid can create. So let's go through it. Number one, the cost, the time, and the resources to fix all the problems that a low bid contractor or supplier delivers to you after that contract is signed. Major downside. I mean, that Harvard example was change order city, change orders galore, and you can't even capture all the soft costs and surrounding gray hair and pain that went with it. Number two, the cost, the time, the resources to then maintain that product that they delivered to you in the long run. Usually what they deliver to you, not usually, but often enough, things are not great. We're going to share a few stories with you from a facilities perspective where low bid products were selected, and then just the long-term life cycle cost of maintaining those in the future is just astronomical. We've got some examples on that we'll share in future times, but it's basically the gift that keeps on giving is what we're saying here, is the work product not always up to snuff. Number 3, as shown in that example from Harvard University, a lot more time, effort, energy, and sadness required to manage a low bid partner sometimes. There's different stats on this, but for example, in the construction world, there's some pretty credible research out there that says that it currently costs client organizations about 25% more effort and overhead to manage a contractor relative to what it cost back in the 1990s. And that's all inflation adjusted, right? So it's costing us 25% more effort to manage our partners externally. And that usually gets higher and higher on the low bid side. And just, you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. Now, on average, the other issue with low bid is just because they were low up fronts, just because they promise you that they're going to be low, that doesn't mean from a full life cycle perspective. What I mean by that is, like, when you sign the contract with them and then you account for all the change orders, it doesn't mean they're actually going to be the low bid. Now, for example, back in Harvard, the upfront promise was $425. The actual reality was $524. It was $99,000 of change orders later. So it was actually $524 was the real life cycle cost. And then the actual life cycle cost should factor in all the time, the effort, the money, the overhead to process those change orders. All of that is a real cost too. It's just that it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't go get assigned directly to that contract. So that's part of the challenge there as well. But you have to be thinking, what's the overall cost of this project on a contractual level when we close it out? And what's the overall cost to the organization too? So if you want more data on like life cycle cost analysis, in that case of that was a construction project example. If you want more examples of that, we did cover this about a year ago. We went through a full research study on what's the total cost of going into an RFP best value scenario rather than low bid. And so go check that one out. It's available free on the websites to walk through some of the actual data on that if you're interested. But that's number 4. It's a downside, is that low upfront cost is just made up in a lot of ways. Like it's not what it's actually going to be. And we all know that. We are like, when the change orders happen later. Number 5 out of 13. We are highly reliant as clients upon the quality of our contracts if we go low bid. It's all about trying to hold that low bidder to the contracts and whatever mechanism we have to enforce that. If it's in construction, right, it's all down to the skill and integrity of that inspector. I'm sure no one's ever been on a construction project where the inspector was motivated to pass something by the project team. That never happens. No. It's all perfectly inspected. There's never any issues. Oh yeah, that building that we have that has all those issues, it passed inspection, but this time it'll be fine. Number 6 out of 13. We've covered this one, I think, sufficiently, but the stress, the gray hair, the damage to the soul for the client who's managing the challenging partner, that's a bummer. Major downside. Number 7. Obviously, low bid incentivizes lower performance labor. Lower dollar per hour is the way to win the job, right? If I have my labor force as a vendor or a contractor, and I'm pricing out the amount of hours to get the project done, and if I can get that lower and lower and lower, which means lower skill, right? Who gets paid cheaper or lower on a dollars per hour basis? Usually lesser skilled labor. You might try to argue me on the productivity side. Well, don't worry. The higher dollars per hour are more productive, so it'll be fewer hours. Unfortunately, skill is not valued at all in the selection process of a low bid approach. It's just, how low can you go? Number 8, most industries that we are selecting within, think about the common things that our organizations do. It's a lot of facilities related things, typically, a lot of smaller construction related things, probably, that we're procuring, those higher transactional type of costs. It can be highly fragmented. There's non-repeat work with in a particular client sometimes, and there's a lot of other work out there. So a low performer can easily survive. Maybe you're really mad at that low performer for the terrible job they did last time. Like maybe Harvard University will never want to hire that contractor again. Well, guess what? There's a million other public sector entities in that small region that they can go and propose on. And oh, by the way, if Harvard were to select on a low bid method in the future, well, then the prior unhappiness is not part of it. It just means, can you go low again and show up next time around? So I've heard all kinds of fun horror stories from cities and states and municipalities who are like, oh, we're in a lawsuit with this vendor right now, but they're the low bidder on this other project, and we're supposed to have them on our do not work with list, but they're not actually on there, or someone didn't check it and didn't know, and yada yada yada, all those fun things. If you are a public sector entity and you are in a metro area that has lots of other public sector entities who are doing low bid, you will probably have a lower performing market of service providers on average, because they all are just used to lowest bottom dollar, not skill, not quality, not value, and it deteriorates the overall production of the sector as a whole. That's all going to be part of it. In construction in particular, the current market has seen mass labor growth. So there's a lot more people working in construction than ever before, a lot more spend going on than ever before. And what you're seeing is average performance via low bid is worse now than ever before. I'll show you this, what I mean. What you're seeing here on this graph, orange is total spend in the entire United States on construction. It's all inflation adjusted as well. So you can see we're currently at a peak of spend all time. And then blue is the construction employment, just total number of employees in the construction sector. When COVID hit, things dropped, and then it kind of bounced back, and it's been slowly growing ever since. And we're actually beyond prior peaks. Well, what you had happen back here is, got to remember, the construction market was the single highest or most resistive to vaccine mandates of any cohort in the country by far. And many of the more experienced workers were overrepresented in that, resistive camp, and they never came back. So yeah, it looks like we bounced back and then grew. You have to think about, well, who is in that mix of employment? What you probably had is, it wasn't like we bounced right back to where we were. We lost some of the older and more experienced, actually quite a bit of the older and more experienced folks here, who just said, it's not worth it. I'm going to retire early, or I'm going to go, be an Amazon truck driver rather than deal with this. And so we lost them. Who do you have here? Young, new, inexperienced type of workers coming into the market. So you've probably got, I don't know, 30% or more of your workforce now is under the highly unskilled, unexperienced category, if you will. So if you're going to go low bid and you're going to dip into that labor pool, the chances that you get an inexperienced crew is way larger now than ever before. Jake, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say too that when you look like safety data, on a chart like this, the point in time when you have the greatest increase in fatalities is not here. This is not it. It's right here in the recovery timeframes. So not only do we have a bunch of brand new people, we have a bunch of brand new people that are going to get themselves killed, and now you're paying not a lot of money for them. So it's recovery timeframes for financial reasons. Bankruptcies typically happen in recoveries. Safety issues. I mean, it's so dangerous, and I don't think most owners realize like the actual significant risks they're going to encounter with that.
Yeah, every available data point shows safety performance right now is worse than ever before, and it's accelerating in its badness. Lots of stories we could tell on that from our travels around the country and different projects. But so that's just kind of one of the things that's more construction specific there. But that's kind of, it is starting to happen in other sectors as well. That's just from a pure demographic standpoint. Number 11. Construction in particular has very low barriers to entry. So new businesses, it's really easy to, be a person with a pickup truck who has a work crew, and you can get started, right? And so that also exacerbates the problem. So if I'm new and inexperienced and I've just entered the market and I just have to be a low price to win, and I'm not that great at pricing it out, well, then could be some trouble. Number 12, very vicious cycle of lower performance, right? If we as a client group have a low performing project and low bid, often what we do is we have a knee-jerk reaction that says we need to add more rules to make sure this doesn't happen again. We need to add more oversights. Maybe we need to micromanage more. And what that in turn does is it turns off or reduces the attractiveness that we have towards the contractors, vendors, and suppliers out there who can provide innovation, who can do things differently, who can, you know, be a higher performer, because they just see us throwing more and more rules at them in response. So once you get burned as a client, you have to be really careful in doing a root cause analysis. Well, why did we have that bad performance outcome? What can we do differently? And if it just means adding more rules as your solution, then be very, very wary of that solution. And the worst thing of all about low bid is that sometimes it does actually work. As negative as I have been, you know, being here, sometimes you pick the lowest bidder and things go fine. And so that's another little bit of camouflage of the overall negative effects that low bid can have across a program. But because sometimes on individual projects, it can totally work. It's not that low bid is always necessarily bad. That's not true. It's that low bid is always necessarily unpredictable. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it does not. And you just get to find out afterwards is what's going on. If it's raw commodities, things like that, that's different. But anytime there's a human involved in your project and that human is performing a task, there is variability. And low bid is highly unpredictable there. So that's the 13 unlucky downsides. The faulty assumptions we want to cover are the following. And these are things that we hear a lot from client groups, and we think that these things are just flat out wrong. So let's go ahead and address them. Number one, you know, low bid is the lowest cost. We've pretty much covered this, but this is not true. You have to take that broader life cycle cost perspective. Another reason why low bid is not the lowest cost is because low bid directly sets you up as a client for change orders later. We had a video on this from a couple years ago. We had a whole study about, you know, scope and document deficiencies during the RFP process, leading to change orders later. Low bid only exacerbates that. We have a fantastic case study on this from the state of Arizona, actually, Jake. So to your nice Arizona-based code for today, we've got a great case study on this that we'll go through later on in a future month together. So that'll be fun. Faulty assumptions about low bid continue. You know, the contract will save me, right? Like, well, it's I've got everything in my contract. I've got all the scope there. Well, that's not going to save you. A signed contract will not protect you from something going wrong. It will only help you figure out who's paying for it and who's liable after the bad thing already occurred. Again, I'm just going to be hitting you with all kinds of resources here. Jake's been totally on it. You know, we did a video on don't worry, the contract will save us. This is from years and years ago, one of the original RFP Doctor sessions. We walked through why that's not necessarily the case. So you can check that out as well. So turns out, you know, we've been subtly hinting at problems with low bid and sometimes not so subtly in the history of RFP Doctor here. So we're just pointing some of those out to you. Number three, sometimes we assume that it will require the same effort from the client side to manage all our different suppliers or contractors, or that effort is just scaled based upon dollar value, right? The bigger project takes more effort to manage, and that's about all the logic that we put into it. The reality is, no, you have to factor in how strong of a performer is that external supplier, contractor, or vendor. You know, lower performers cost more time. You know, the squeaky wheel gets the oil is what's going on in a lot of our challenging projects. Higher performers are much easier to work with. And unfortunately, in low bid, you don't know who you're going to get. Sometimes okay, sometimes not okay. Number four, we assume that problems on an individual project are contained within that project, but that's not true. Every time you're sucking in external or broader client resources, or you're sucking the soul out of a client project manager, that absolutely has ramifications across the organization. And a lot of times one bad project will affect the other bad projects or other projects going on. That's really bad, but a bad project can affect others because it's late or something like that. And also it can affect how other projects are managed because a bad project is sucking up resources and time and focus, and it's hindering organizational decision-making on the other projects as well. So like, in other words, a project gone bad affects more than just that project is all we're saying there. That's pretty simple. Next up, sometimes we think that the company itself matters more than the bid. So like, as long as we get a responsive and responsible company, however we define that with our minimum qualifications, then we'll be okay. The reality is that, the company matters a little bit, but the actual people they send matters a lot. And you have to remember that some companies all companies have their high performers, and they've got their lower performers and their newbies. And the type of client you are will dictate which people they send to you, if that makes sense. So if you're going to tell a vendor community that all you care about is lowest price, well, then as a vendor, I have no incentive to send you my best people. Well, it's still the same company. I still have my same logo and my same name. You're just not going to get my best people because it doesn't matter. It doesn't help me win work or at all with you. So why would I send them to you? We've got some great case studies on this coming up as a part of our new low bid disaster series as well. Some of them will have happy endings, but not all of them will. Contract enforcement is easy. We've kind of talked about that. It's not true. The more you defer to like, hey, the contract or the inspector is going to catch this, then by the time that happens and you're dealing with it, things have already gone wrong and both parties have probably deviated. Budgets, those are accurate and reliable. I will be able to spot a faulty low bidder because it will not agree with my budget, and I'll be able to say, no, don't be tempted by that low price. It's probably that they're wrong. My budget is right. Nope. Clients and even your designers or external consultants are notoriously bad at budgeting. Sorry to break it to you. Therefore, it's hard to know if that low bid is accurate, if it's in range, if it's not, how to question it, when to question it. All that's a challenge. Other assumptions. Well, as long as we use an RFP, Brian, then it's not low bid. Wrong. Totally wrong. You can absolutely have a low bid RFP. Just because you slap 3 letters RFP on it doesn't make it non-low bid. If you weight the cost or financial section higher than about 35%, your RFP will function almost identically to low bid. There's various reasons behind this. We covered this in a video last year, and why we recommend that 35% range. But yeah, you can absolutely have a cost focused or price focused RFP. Just because you slap RFP on it doesn't make it a non-low bid scenario. Next up, same thing goes for pre-qualifications, right? If we pre-qualify, therefore we're considering qualifications in there. Well, if you pre-qualify and then you ask for price, all you're doing is having a less competitive low bid field competing on your project. That's all you're doing. You're just restricting it down and getting even worse competition. But it makes us feel good sometimes to have a pre-qualification option there. So be very careful about that, especially if you're pre-qualifying based upon company level measures, like did they have the right insurance or bonding or workloads or whatever, and you're considering the company, they have the best, they have good portfolio of experience. None of that is related to the actual team they're going to send you. And if you're going to bid them on the next round or make price a big focus of that next round, then they're not going to send you the best people. That's just how it's going to go. And you've just made yourself an artificially restricted low bid scenario where you shortlist it off of something that doesn't really matter anyway. If you want more of us on our high horse about the unintended consequences of pre-qualifications, you can check that out as a prior video as well. It's just putting lipstick on a pig that is still low bid. Bonus content on the construction side. Sometimes we think, well, what if we get an alternative project delivery? So what I mean by that is like construction manager at risk, CMGC, design build, progressive design build, integrated project delivery. Well, those are not low bid, Brian. They're not low bid. So that's good, right? Wrong. Not true. If all of the subs are getting bid out underneath your prime construction manager or design build team, and they're all getting bid out, and it's all just going to the cheapest sub, it's still a low bid project. And usually you're seeing somewhere in the 80 to 95% range of actual work and trades being bid out underneath the prime. So it's just low bid. You just have removed it from your site. You've been able to lift up your nose and hide yourself from the smell of low bid. And then it's all just getting ultra low bid underneath you on a per package basis. And we can just say, la, and forget about it. And I love this one from your construction managers and design builds out there. Oh, no. We don't select our subs based on low bid. We pre-qualify them first. No, it's glorified low bid. I have such angry stories about that I can't even get into them now. It's all low bid. They just say it to sound nice. And at least alternative delivery at the prime level then. Okay, Brian, if it's at the subcontractor level, it's all low bid is what you're saying, or it's the risk of being that way. Maybe at least the prime, the construction manager we pick or design builder we pick, at least there it's not a low bid selection. Well, wrong. If you're asking for a fee and you're not competing that part very well and in a structured manner, and you're trying to avoid all that game playing that happens, is it a project cost, a direct cost, an indirect costs, overhead fee, like people push stuff around and they know that you just want the cheapest possible. That's why you get all these pre-construction fees coming back at zero. Is it true that spending time to help you in pre-construction has zero cost to them? No. They're just trying to game your system because they think it's a low bid mentality is going to win. So there's some bonuses on alternative project delivery, which brings me to another exciting announcement. The other exciting announcement is outside of the regularly scheduled RFP Doctor sessions, we are launching a separate standalone series on alternative delivery. We've had some requests across the spring where in the RFP Doctors, we were covering some design and construction related procurement topics. We had requests to do something on alternative delivery, so we will do that. So we're going to do that in September. We'll cover the different delivery methods, and then we'll specifically look at procuring within construction manager at risk and design build, progressive design build, just because those are some of the more popular and common methods out there. We'll do 3 90-minute sessions on these and walk through a boatload of examples. So stay tuned for the official announcements and actual registration form there as well. I know we're going long here, but we're throwing the book at low bid. It's just what we're going to do. So to summarize, summarizing low bid and another exciting announcement. Low bid is really just doing business on a promise made up front, and that promise is often faulty, met with change orders and surprises later. There are just so many downsides to low bid. It's hard to explain why it gets such a pass and it's so commonly used. I think the only way I can really explain it is by calling it what the title of our talk was. It is a cult. We are all in a collective delusion on using this across our entities. And to make it work, it requires us to make all these faulty assumptions to convince ourselves that it's the right way to go. Now, I'm not saying that it can never be used. We're not saying that. So there's practical realities in terms of resources to get transactions done. There are areas where it does make sense, where things are an actual commodity. Just be careful where you use it is really what we're saying.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.